Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel, Expensive Connoisseur World, where we dive deep into the world of coins, collectibles, and more. The coin in your image is a 1965 British Caribbean Territories Eastern Group 25-cents coin, issued during the period when several Caribbean islands were under British colonial administration. The inscription around the coin reads, British Caribbean Territories, Eastern Group 25 cents, along with the year of issue 1965 and the denomination 25, repeated on each side of the central design. At the center is a beautifully engraved sailing ship, a motif symbolizing maritime trade, exploration, and the connection between the scattered islands of the Eastern Caribbean and the wider world. The sailing vessel chosen is often said to represent the Santa Maria or a generic trading ship, a deliberate choice by the Royal Mint to emphasize both history and commerce. The reverse design reflects the fact that these islands relied heavily on sea trade for economic survival, connecting them not only with Britain, their colonial ruler, but also with Europe, Africa, and the Americas. On the obverse, the front side, not visible in your image, the coin carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, who was monarch at the time. Her effigy was included on all colonial and Commonwealth coinage as a mark of sovereignty, linking the local populations back to the British crown. The words Queen Elizabeth II typically circle around her bust. This portrait is not just a mark of political authority, but also a unifying symbol. Even though these Caribbean islands were thousands of miles away from London, the Queen's image served as a constant reminder of shared allegiance to the British Empire and later the Commonwealth of Nations. The phrase you mentioned, liberty, égalité, fraternité, republic, is actually the national motto of France, meaning liberty, equality, brotherhood, republic. It does not appear on this particular coin, but provides an interesting contrast. Whereas French colonies often carried republican symbols and ideals, British colonial coinage reflected monarchical imagery, hierarchy, and maritime power. The difference in symbolism between British and French colonial coins highlights two distinct political philosophies, one based on monarchy and continuity, the other on revolution and egalitarianism. Returning to the 1965 British Caribbean Territories coin, it was part of a regional currency arrangement created to simplify trade and unify the economies of the smaller islands. Before independence movements gained momentum, the British Caribbean Territories Eastern Group currency was issued jointly for several islands including Antigua, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Vincent, Grenada, and Montserrat. Instead of each island minting its own coinage, a single monetary system was used, which promoted unity and reduced the cost of coin production. These coins circulated widely until the establishment of the Eastern Caribbean Currency Authority in 1965 and later the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank ECCB in 1983, which now issues the familiar Eastern Caribbean dollar, still in use today across multiple islands. The year 1965 is significant historically. By this time, many Caribbean territories were on the path towards self-governance or independence. Jamaica had already left the West Indies Federation in 1962. Trinidad and Tobago had become independent the same year, and Barbados, Guyana, and others were pushing toward their own nationhood. Yet, in smaller Eastern Caribbean islands, complete independence was delayed. Instead, Britain allowed them partial self-government while still maintaining control over defense and foreign affairs. This coin therefore exists in a transitional moment. It still bears the Queen's image and colonial inscriptions, but foreshadows the regional identity that would later solidify under the Eastern Caribbean dollar. From a numismatic perspective, the 1965 25-cent coin is of interest for several reasons. First, its design is highly detailed, with the ship's sails, rigging, and waves carefully engraved, making it attractive to collectors. Second, coins from the British Caribbean territories were not produced in huge numbers compared to larger economies, meaning that well-preserved specimens are increasingly sought after. While the coin's face value was only a quarter of a Caribbean dollar, its collector's value today can range from a few dollars to over $20 depending on condition, rarity, and demand among collectors. Uncirculated or proof-like examples can fetch higher prices, particularly if they retain their mint luster. Symbolically, the ship at the center of the design carries deep meaning. For the Caribbean islands, the sea was both a blessing and a burden. It brought colonizers, enslaved Africans, indentured laborers, and goods, shaping the region's history through centuries of contact and exchange. At the same time, it provided livelihood through fishing, sugar exports, and later tourism. Thus, the coin serves as colonial coinage system. Within a decade of its minting, many of these islands would either move toward independence or secure a new constitutional status within the Commonwealth. For example, Grenada gained independence in 1974, St. Lucia in 1979, and St. Kitts and Nevis in 1983. Yet, the shared Eastern Caribbean dollar persisted, showing how economic unity outlasted political colonialism. In conclusion, the 1965 British Caribbean Territories 25-cent coin is more than just a small piece of metal. It is a tangible artifact of colonial history, maritime culture, and economic cooperation. It blends the imagery of a ship representing trade, exploration, and connection with the portrait of a monarch representing authority, continuity, and tradition. While it lacks the revolutionary motto of Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, it nonetheless carries its own form of symbolism rooted in British imperial values. Today, it appeals not only to coin collectors, but also to historians, cultural enthusiasts, and anyone interested in the fascinating transition of Caribbean societies from colonial territories to independent states. To hold such a coin is to hold a fragment of the past, a reminder of how global empires, small islands, and the flow of goods and ideas were all bound together by the vast Atlantic world. The next step top two from the details you mention, the image you show. The coin is a UK to shillings florin coin. From the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, it has inscriptions like Elizabeth II, Dei Gratia Regina. Translated, Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen and also Fidei Defensor, Defender of the Faith. The reverse shows floral emblems rose, thistle, shamrock, etc. The date in your example seems to be 1956, so this is a 1956. Elizabeth to florin, to shillings. Full Latin legend/motto. Here are the key Latin phrases you likely asked about. Elizabeth II Dei Gratia Regina equals Elizabeth II. By the grace of God, Queen. Fidei Defensor, Fid Def equals Defender of the Faith. These Latin inscriptions are standard on UK coins, combining the monarch's name and titles. The Dei Gratia part is an old tradition, meaning that sovereignty is understood as conferred by God's grace. Regina equals Queen. Fidei Defensor is a title given since Henry VIII, meaning the monarch is the protector of the church in its faith Anglican, physical and design features. Here are the technical details of the 1956 florin coin. Feature detail Donian 2. Shillings, also called florin country United Kingdom pre-decimal currency. Adverse front. Laureate bust of Queen Elizabeth II, facing right. Inscription, Elizabeth to Dei Gratia Regina, Fid DF depending on year. Might omit Britanniarum omnium etc. Reverse back Tudor rose at center. Surrounded by Thistle Scotland, Shamrock Ireland, and Leek Wales. With date and to shillings. Designed by Ecker Fuller and Cecil Thomas. Metal per. Composition copper nickel 75% copper, 25% nickel. For years 1954 to 1970, weighed about 11.31 grams diameter, 28.3 millimeters. Thickness 2.5 millimeters. Edge chaperound, milled reeded edge. Historical and numismatic context. The florin to shillings was introduced much earlier, but in the Elizabeth II era it was in circulation from about 1953 until decimalisation, when UK switched to decimal currency in 1971. The coin you have 1956 is among the early issues of Elizabeth. The obverse design portrait is by Mary Gellick. These coins were demonetized, ceased to be legal tender on the 30th of June 1993. After that date, they are only of interest to collectors. Value factors. The value of such a coin depends on several factors. Condition, grade good, very good, fine, very fine, uncirculated, etc. Coins with less wear are worth more. Rarity, mint run, 1956. Had a large mintage, approximately 47,824,000. So it's not extremely rare. Any errors or variants, if there is a minting error or special die variety, that can increase value. Demand among collectors and metal value, though its base metal copper nickel. Not precious. In typical circulated condition, these coins are modest in value, few dollars. In very high grade uncirculated, proof, etc., collectors may pay much more. The next up, top 3, the inscription Liberty, Eaglite, Fraternit, Republic. 20 cent 1978, Australia, Elizabeth II, Regina. Combines symbolic, historic, and numismatic elements that each carry a long tradition in political philosophy, coinage, and the representation of national identity. To understand such a coin, even in its symbolic description, we must look at it from several angles. The French Revolutionary motto, the concept of republic, the denomination of 20 cent, the year 1978, the Australian context, and the enduring presence of Queen Elizabeth II with her regal Latin titles such as Regina. The phrase liberty, eaglite, fraternity emerged during the French Revolution in the late 18th century and became the official motto of the French Republic. It embodies the Enlightenment principles of freedom, equality before the law, and universal brotherhood of humanity, ideals that inspired democratic movements worldwide. When this phrase is imagined on a coin, it evokes not merely the French nation, but also the universal spirit of republican values that transcended borders and influenced both monarchies and Commonwealth nations. The word republic reinforces this connection, since republicanism emphasizes governance by the people rather than hereditary monarchy. Though Australia itself remained a constitutional monarchy under Queen Elizabeth II in 1978, the denomination 20 cent places the coin within the decimal currency system. Australia adopted decimal currency in 1966, replacing the old system of pounds, shillings, and pence. The 20 cent coin became one of the most widely circulated denominations, struck in cupronickel, featuring the platypus design by Stuart Devlin on the reverse and the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse. By 1978, this coin had already become familiar in everyday Australian commerce, symbolizing the nation's modern financial identity. The year 1978 anchors this coin in a specific historical context. This was a period of stability in Australia, when the nation was consolidating its post-war prosperity, expanding its multicultural identity, and strengthening ties both to the Commonwealth and the Asia-Pacific region. Globally, 1978 was a year of change. The Cold War still defined geopolitics, but democratization and human rights discourses were rising in importance. A coin from this year reflects both the durability of national traditions and the subtle influence of global ideological currents. On the obverse, the effigy of Elizabeth II Regina carries its own layers of meaning. The Latin term Regina means queen, affirming her sovereignty. Queen Elizabeth II, as head of state of Australia, was depicted on all Australian coins. linking the Commonwealth realm to centuries of royal imagery. In 1978, the portrait used was designed by Arnold Machen, characterized by a youthful yet regal image of the Queen wearing the tiara of the girls of Great Britain and Ireland, symbolizing both elegance and authority. This portrait connected coins in Australia, Britain, Canada, and other Commonwealth nations, reinforcing the unity of the Commonwealth. The combination of Republican mottos such as Liberty, Eagle-eyed, fraternate with the monarchic title Elizabeth II Regina may seem contradictory, but it reveals the tension between ideals of democracy and traditions of monarchy that often coexist in modern states. In Australia, debates about republicanism intensified in later decades, but in 1978 the monarchy remained widely accepted. This imagined blending on a coin highlights the layered symbolism of coins themselves. They are not just money, but small monuments of history, power, and cultural identity. A coin is an everyday object that carries extraordinary meaning. It speaks of sovereignty, economy, ideology, and identity all at once. In this way, the 1978 Australian 20-cent coin with Queen Elizabeth II represents continuity, while the overlay of Republican and revolutionary language such as liberty, eagle-eyed, fraternate recalls the universal aspirations of human dignity and equality. Taken together, such an object invites us to reflect on the relationship between empire and republic, between tradition and modernity, and between national identity and universal ideals, making it not just a piece of currency, but a piece of living history that tells a story of Australia's place in the wider world. During the late 20th century, the next up top for the coin you are referring to, the Liberty, Eagle-eyed, fraternate Republic 20, cent 1980 Australia Elizabeth II Regina, represents an interesting blend of symbols, mottos, and historical influences, though in reality it merges to different traditions, the French Republican motto and the British-influenced Australian coinage featuring Queen Elizabeth II. To give a long and detailed explanation, let us first break it into elements. The phrase Liberty, Eagle-eyed, fraternate is the national motto of France, born from the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799, and later adopted as the core expression of Republican ideals. It translates to liberty, equality, brotherhood, expressing the three pillars of civic life under the Republican vision: the freedom of the individual, the equality of all citizens under the law, and the fraternity or solidarity binding a society together. The word republic emphasizes the form of government that rejects monarchy and hereditary rule, favoring instead the sovereignty of the people. Now, when we turn to the Australian 20-cent coin of 1980, we encounter a very different system. Australia, though a Commonwealth nation, recognizes the British monarch as head of state, which is why the obverse of the coin features the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II. The inscription, Elizabeth II Regina, translates to Elizabeth II, Queen Regina being Latin for queen, and such inscriptions have been used on coinage for centuries to affirm royal authority. By 1980, the Australian 20-cent coin was already a well-established decimal currency denomination, introduced in 1966 during Australia's transition from pounds, shillings, and pence to the decimal system of dollars and cents. The reverse design of this coin was created by Stuart Devlin, the Australian goldsmith and jeweler, appointed as official designer of the new decimal coinage. The 20-cent piece famously bears the platypus, an iconic and uniquely Australian creature chosen deliberately to symbolize the nation's natural heritage and distinctiveness from Europe. This stands in fascinating contrast to the obverse, which depicts the monarch, thus balancing national identity with Commonwealth ties. The 1980 coin belongs to the era of the Arnold Machen portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, which shows a youthful queen wearing the royal tiara given to her by her grandmother. Queen Mary. This portrait was widely used across Commonwealth coinage in the 1970s and 1980s. Historically, the year 1980 itself falls during a period of Australian consolidation of national identity, with debates over greater independence, recognition of Indigenous heritage, and strengthening of Australian symbolism in international life. Yet still under the royal image, the denomination 20 cent filled a practical role in the economy, large enough in value to be useful for daily transactions, but small enough to circulate widely. It is a cupronickel coin, 75% copper, 25% nickel, with a diameter of 28.65 millimeters, weight of 11.3 grams, and smooth edge, making it one of the heavier and broader decimal coins, easily recognizable by touch. Symbolically, then, we have two very different ideologies blended in your description: the Republican ideals of liberty, equality, fraternity, and the monarchical inscription of Elizabeth II Regina. Taken together, they reflect the ongoing tension between monarchy and republicanism that has shaped much of modern political thought, particularly in countries like Australia, where the Republican movement has often questioned whether the head of state should remain a foreign monarch. The coin thus becomes a canvas for exploring not only monetary utility, but also deep questions of identity, sovereignty, and symbolism. It unites nature platypus, heritage Elizabeth II Regina, and values liberty, equality, fraternity if imagined alongside republic, showing how coins are never just small metallic discs, but compressed narratives of power, culture, and philosophy.